I never thought a wedding could destroy me. I smiled that day, thinking everything was perfect, till the photographer called me the next morning. He sounded nervous, almost afraid. Then he said words that froze my blood. "I noticed something very disturbing in your wedding photos." My heart raced. Something was terribly wrong, and it involved someone I trusted, someone who had been pretending to be everything I thought they were. I did not know it yet, but this discovery would push me to the edge on, set me on a path for the most satisfying revenge I could ever imagine. But what he showed me in those pictures would change everything. My name is Michael Turner. I am 31, and I thought I knew what happiness felt like. I met Emily Parker 3 years ago, and from the very beginning, she seemed perfect. Smart, beautiful, charming. The kind of woman everyone admired and secretly envied. I fell hard and fast. Every text, every smile, every late-night phone call felt like confirmation that I had found someone extraordinary. I told myself I was lucky. Friends said I was living a dream. I believed them because I wanted to believe in her. Our wedding day was supposed to be the pinnacle of everything I had worked toward in life. The ceremony took place in a small coastal town in Maine. The late morning sun poured through the tall windows of the chapel, casting golden light on the white lilies and pale pink roses that lined the aisle. The air smelled of salt and flowers, and for the first time in months, I felt completely at peace. Emily looked radiant. Her dress hugged her in all the right places, and she moved as if she had been born to be photographed. I was proud, and I could not stop smiling. The photographer, a man named Jason Collins, was a quiet, observant type. I barely noticed him during the ceremony, except to make sure he captured every angle. I did not realize then that his camera lens would become a window into a truth I was not ready to see. From the start, Emily had been flawlesser, so I thought. She always laughed at my jokes, remembered details about my family, and made me feel like I was the only man who mattered in the world. Yet there were little things I noticed but brushed aside. A phone screen she quickly turned when I walked by. Messages she seemed to delete almost immediately. Friends would call and mention she had canceled plans she never told me about. I told myself I was imagining things. I wanted to trust her completely. On the morning after the wedding, I was still floating on the high of the previous day. I woke to the sound of my phone buzzing on the nightstand. It was Jason, the photographer. His voice was tense, almost fearful. He said, "Michael, I noticed something very disturbing in your wedding photos. I think you need to see them before anyone else does." My stomach dropped. Disturbing? What could he possibly mean? I agreed to meet him at a quiet coffee shop near the harbor. When I arrived, Jason handed me a manila folder. I flipped through the photos, expecting nothing more than the usual smiles and posed shots. At first, everything seemed normal. But then I saw it, a shadow behind Emily during the ceremony, subtle glances exchanged in the corner of the room, expressions that did not belong in a wedding album. And then Jason said something that made my blood run cold. "Look closely at the reception photos. There is a man with her someone she has been hiding." My hands shook as I stared at the images again and again. At first, I thought I was imagining things, but the evidence was clear. This was no small deception. She had been living a secret I had never suspected, hiding someone in plain sight, while pretending our entire relationship was perfect. I felt a mix of disbelief and rage. How long had this been going on? What else was she hiding? And the worst part, how could someone I trusted so completely be capable of this? I left the coffee shop with a knot in my stomach, every step heavy with uncertainty. My life, the life I thought I had been built on a lie. I knew one thing for certain. If I did not act, I would carry this betrayal forever, and I would never allow Emily to manipulate or control me again. Something inside me shifted that day. I was calm, focused, but beneath that surface, a storm was building. I did not yet know the full scope of her deception, but I knew I had to find out. Little did I know, the discovery in those photos would set me on a path that would change my life completely, pushing me toward a decision I never thought I would make. The woman I loved had underestimated me on that was about to cost her everything. If you have ever felt betrayed by someone you trusted, hit that like button and subscribe. This story is about uncovering a secret that should never have been hidden, and the revenge that followed. It is going to get intense, emotional, and satisfying in ways you never expect. The days after the wedding were unbearable. Every time I saw Emily, I felt a hollow ache in my chest, a mixture of disbelief and simmering anger. She carried on as if nothing had happened, smiling, laughing, planning our honeymoon. I could not understand how someone could look at me with such warmth while hiding a secret that cut so deep. Every word she spoke, every casual glance, felt like a knife twisting inside me. I tried to confront her subtly at first. I asked about the night she claimed to be with her friends. She smiled, laughed, and said I was imagining things. She accused me of being paranoid, of turning a small misunderstanding into a big problem. That made my blood boil. Her calm, dismissive demeanor was infuriating. She was skilled at deflecting, at making me doubt myself. I began to realize just how carefully she had manipulated me all along. At night, I could not sleep. I replayed every conversation, every gesture, every text I had dismissed. The proof Jason had shown me in those photos kept flashing in my mind. Emily whispering with someone in the corner of the reception hall. Her laughter too intimate, her eyes hiding something she did not want me to see. I felt powerless and enraged at the same time. I began watching her more closely. Every call, every message, every sudden disappearance. I could sense the lies, the secrets, the carefully constructed world she had created to keep me blind. The more I observed, the more details emerged. She was meeting someone in secret, leaving her phone behind, texting in codes I barely understood. The realization hit me again and again. This was not a one-time mistake. This was an ongoing deception. One afternoon, I followed her to a small cafe downtown. She smiled when she saw a man sitting in the corner, someone I did not recognize. They exchanged greetings, touches, and whispers that made my stomach turn. I sat in the car, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles whitened, watching them laugh together as if our marriage was nothing more than a lie. I could feel my heart pounding, rage and helplessness mingling into a storm I could barely control. I wanted to scream, to confront her publicly, to demand answers, but I knew that would not work. She was too clever to practice at pretending. Any outburst from me would only give her a chance to cover her tracks, to twist the narrative, to make me the villain. I realized that if I wanted justice, I had to be smarter, more patient, and more calculated than she could ever imagine. At home, I went through the photos again and again. Each frame told a story I had missed in the rush of joy and celebration. Each shadow, each glance, each subtle expression was a piece of a puzzle that exposed her betrayal in stark detail. I began making notes, documenting every lie, every secret meeting, every contradiction in her stories. I started building a case. The frustration became unbearable. I wanted to scream at her, to shake her until she admitted the truth. Instead, I wrote in my journal, tracing her steps, plotting my next moves. I imagined the moment when everything would come to light, and the shock that would ripple through our friends, our family, and her carefully constructed world. And then came the first real twist. I discovered a series of messages she thought I would never see. Messages between her and a man named Ryan Carter, filled with inside jokes, flirtations, and plans that excluded me entirely. I felt my chest tighten, my vision blur, and a cold clarity settle over me. I had reached the edge. I could feel the turning point approaching, the moment when passive suspicion would give way to decisive action. Little did Emily know, every step she had taken to deceive me had been noticed, recorded, and stored. Every lie had strengthened my resolve. The storm inside me was no longer confusion or sadness. It had become a precise, burning determination to expose the truth and to make sure she could never hide again. It was a rainy Thursday evening when everything finally snapped. I had spent the entire day following Emily, tracking her movements, piecing together the fragments of her secret life. Each discovery made my chest tighter, each lie sharper. I could feel a storm building inside me, a mixture of rage, betrayal, and a growing need for control. I realized that I could not live like this any longer, trapped in a house full of smiles and laughter that masked deception. I parked across the street from the restaurant where she was meeting Ryan Carter again. Watching through the rain-streaked window, I saw them laugh, lean close, whispered things that made my blood boil. I could not believe I had ever trusted her completely. Every promise she had made, every moment of affection, now seemed calculated, rehearsed, and false. I wanted to burst through the door and scream, but I knew that would accomplish nothing. She was too skilled at hiding the truth. I had to be smarter. That night, I sat alone in my apartment, rain tapping against the windows, feeling the cold seep into my bones. I replayed every memory of the past 3 years. The smiles, the late-night talks, the vacations I had planned with Love and Carol, now tainted by the knowledge that they had been built on lies. I felt a quiet fury simmering beneath my skin, a fire that demanded action. I could no longer be passive. I could no longer let her manipulate me, or anyone else for that matter. I started thinking about the evidence I had gathered. Jason's photos, the messages I had uncovered, every secret meeting I had documented. Each piece told a story of deception and betrayal, a story that could not be ignored or erased. I realized that revenge was no longer a distant idea. It was a necessity, not for cruelty, but for justice and for reclaiming control of my own life. I remembered Jason's warning, his voice shaking when he told me about the disturbing images. He had said that once I saw the truth fully, there would be no turning back. That warning resonated now louder than ever. I could feel the weight of responsibility pressing down on me. I had to act, and I had to act carefully. Every step I took from here on would determine the outcome. One misstep, and Emily would continue to manipulate, lie, and deceive. I could not allow that. I made a plan that night, a careful, calculated plan that would expose her lies without giving her a chance to escape or deflect. I would gather everyone close to us, present the evidence, and let the truth speak for itself. No confrontation, no shouting, just undeniable proof. I could almost see the moment in my mind, the shock in their eyes, the realization of what she had done, the silence as the truth settled like a heavy weight in the room, and then came the hardest part, controlling my own emotions. Until that moment, I had to appear calm, collected, confident. The fire inside me had to be channeled, not lost in outbursts. I knew that if I showed her fear, anger, or desperation, she would twist it against me. I had to become the eye of the storm, quiet but deadly in purpose. The decision crystallized in my mind. I would take control of this situation. I would not let betrayal define me. I would not let deceit rob me of my dignity, my sense of justice, or my life. I would expose the truth, and I would do it in a way that ensured she could never hide again. As I went to bed that night, my mind was racing, plotting, calculating. But for the first time in days, I felt a strange calm. The turning point had arrived. I was no longer a victim of her lies. I was ready to act, ready to reclaim my life, and ready to make her face the consequences of the world she had so carefully hidden from me. Little did Emily know, the storm that had been quietly building in me for months was about to break, and she would be powerless to stop it. The next morning I woke with a clarity that felt almost unnatural. The chaos in my mind had settled into something sharp and controlled. I sat at the kitchen table with a notebook and wrote down everything I had. Jason's photographs, the messages between Emily and Ryan Carter, the dates, times, and locations of their meetings. Each detail mattered. Each detail was a brick in the structure I was building. I was no longer reacting. I was constructing something deliberate, something unavoidable. I called Jason first. His voice was cautious when he answered, as if he already knew this conversation would change everything. I told him I was ready. I told him I needed his help to make sure the truth could not be dismissed or twisted. There was a long pause before he spoke. Then he said he would stand by me. That moment felt like the first real step forward. I was no longer alone in this. I spent hours organizing the evidence. I arranged the photos in chronological order, letting the story unfold naturally. At first, they showed innocence, smiles, laughter, celebration. Then slowly, the cracks appeared. A lingering look, a hand brushing against another, a man standing just close enough to Emily that it could not be coincidence. The progression was subtle but undeniable. Anyone who saw it would feel the same tightening in their chest that I had felt. Next came the messages. I printed them out, highlighting the lines that revealed intent, planning, and emotional intimacy. These were not casual conversations. These were not harmless jokes. They were confessions disguised as affection. Reading them again made my hands shake, but I forced myself to stay calm. Emotion would not guide me now. Precision would. I decided the setting had to be controlled. Public enough that Emily could not deny what was happening, but private enough to prevent chaos. I chose a small gathering at our house, framed as a post-wedding celebration for close friends and family. The people who mattered most, the people whose opinion she valued, the people she had lied to as much as she had lied to me. I sent out the invitations with a steady hand. Emily smiled when I told her about it, her eyes lighting up with excitement. That smile cut deeper than any insult. She was standing on the edge of everything collapsing and had no idea. For a moment, I almost felt pity. Then I remembered the cafe, the messages, the photos. Pity faded into resolve. In the days leading up to the gathering, I rehearsed the sequence again and again in my mind. First, the slideshow. No accusations, no raised voice, just the story told through images. Let them see it, let them feel it, then the messages, then silence. I imagined the room going still, the air thick with realization. I imagined Emily searching for words that would not exist. I prepared the living room like a small theater. The lights would be dim, the projector placed carefully so every image would be clear. Chairs arranged to face the wall. Everything had to be perfect. Every detail mattered. This was not just about exposing her. This was about reclaiming my power. The night before the gathering, I barely slept. My mind replayed every possible outcome. What if she tried to interrupt? What if she cried? What if she lashed out? I prepared myself for each scenario. I would remain silent. I would let the evidence speak. Silence would be my strength. When the day arrived, my body felt calm, but my heart beat with controlled intensity. Emily moved through the house, humming, arranging snacks, greeting guests with warmth and laughter. Watching her perform that role felt surreal. It was like observing an actor who had forgotten the audience was about to see the final act. As people filled the room, I took my place near the projector. My hands were steady, my breathing slow. This was the moment everything changed. Years of trust, months of suspicion, weeks of planning had all led here. I looked at Emily one last time before starting. She met my eyes and smiled, completely unaware. In that moment, I felt no hesitation, only certainty. I turned off the lights. The room fell silent, and as the first image appeared on the wall, I knew there was no turning back. The room went dark, and the projector flickered to life. The first photo appeared, the smiling faces of our wedding guests, frozen in time. Laughter, joy, innocence. For a moment, Emily looked at the wall, relaxed, confident, unaware that the story was about to shift. Then the second photo appeared, a subtle shadow behind Emily during the ceremony. A glance to intimate between her and Ryan Carter. Her smile now looked rehearsed, her eyes hiding secrets. She shifted in her seat, almost imperceptibly, as if sensing that something was off. My pulse quickened. The tension in the room was palpable. I began narrating my voice, calm, deliberate. I did not accuse, I let the images speak. I described the events, the locations, the dates, the interactions. I highlighted the patterns of deception without emotion, letting the truth unfold naturally. Gasps punctuated the room. Friends leaned forward, squinting at the images. Some whispered to one another, unable to believe what they were seeing. Emily's face began to pale. Her confident mask started to crack. She tried to smile, to meet my eyes, to communicate something, but I did not look at her. I could feel the energy shift, the control sliding from her hands to mine. Every subtle movement she made betrayed panic, guilt, and disbelief. The slideshow continued. Photos of private meetings, messages displayed on the wall, the moments she had thought invisible now, fully exposed. I narrated each one, highlighting the intimacy, the secrecy, the betrayal. The room was silent, save for the soft hum of the projector and the occasional gasp. Each image struck like a hammer, undeniable proof of her lies. Then came the message screenshots. The texts between Emily and Ryan Carter, highlighted and displayed in full. Friends murmured, reading aloud phrases that had once been hidden. Emily reached for her phone, as if she could erase the evidence, but it was too late. Every word, every confession, every plan was now public in that room. I paused and let it sink in. Silence. The tension hung thick, almost tangible. I could see the panic in her eyes, the rapid movement of her hands, the way her lips parted as if she wanted to explain, to twist, to plead. But the proof was relentless. The deception could not be hidden any longer. A friend whispered, voice shaking, "I cannot believe this." All these years, Emily's face turned ashen. Her carefully constructed world had collapsed in minutes. The truth had stripped her of control, of dignity, of power. I felt a wave of release wash over me. Every sleepless night, every knot in my chest, every ounce of tension and fury was dissolving into calm triumph. Relief mingled with satisfaction. I had done what I had set out to do. I had reclaimed my life, my dignity, and my sense of justice. The humiliation she felt was complete and deserved. Emily sank into the chair, silent, trembling, unable to speak. She had nothing left to hide. The room held its collective breath, watching her crumble, watching the consequences of her lies unfold. I realized in that moment that revenge is not about cruelty, it is about balance. It is about ensuring that deceit cannot continue unchecked. I allowed myself a quiet smile. I did not gloat, I did not need to. The truth had spoken for itself. The room had seen the deception laid bare, the betrayal exposed, and justice served. As the final photo faded from the wall, I turned the projector off. The lights came back on, revealing shocked faces, whispering voices, and Emily's hollow stare. I felt a sense of peace, a calm I had not known in weeks. The storm had passed. I had taken control. I had exposed the lies. And I knew, with a deep certainty, that Emily would never underestimate me again. The weight that had burdened me for months had lifted, leaving clarity, triumph, and a quiet, unshakable satisfaction. In the quiet aftermath of the gathering, I sat alone in the living room, watching the soft glow of the streetlights through the window. The tension, the anger, the frustration, all of it had dissipated. I felt lighter, clearer, as if the weight of months of betrayal had finally been lifted from my shoulders. Karma, in its own way, had done its work. Emily had been confronted with the truth in front of everyone she cared about, and she could not escape it. I realized then that justice does not always come from the law or from society. It can come from the deliberate, careful actions of someone who refuses to be silenced or manipulated. I thought about the lessons I had learned. Trust is fragile. People are capable of deception in ways we cannot always anticipate. And most importantly, patience and precision are far more powerful than raw emotion. The weeks of planning, documenting, and observing had been difficult, but they had been necessary. They ensured that the truth was undeniable and that I could reclaim my life without losing myself in anger. I also understood the importance of self-respect and boundaries. For too long, I had allowed myself to be blind to subtle signs, to excuse her behavior in the name of love. I had almost paid the ultimate price of continuing to live in a world built on lies. Taking control, gathering proof, and executing a measured plan was not about cruelty, was about asserting my worth and refusing to let deception define me. As the night deepened, I reflected on how life would move forward. Emily would now have to live with the consequences of her choices. Friends and family had witnessed the truth, and her carefully curated image of perfection had been shattered. I would not forgive her, not because I am bitter, but because forgiveness without accountability would undermine everything I had worked for. Some actions demand consequence, and she had been given hers. I thought about myself too. I was stronger than I had realized. I had navigated betrayal, emotional chaos, and moral complexity with clarity. I had learned that power does not always belong to those who deceive or manipulate. It belongs to those who act with intelligence, courage, and resolve. That realization brought a deep sense of peace. I could breathe again, think again, and plan a life free of lies and manipulation. In the weeks that followed, I focused on myself. I rebuilt routines, nurtured relationships that were honest and genuine, and pursued personal goals with renewed energy. Every time I passed the living room where the slideshow had played, I remembered the moment when truth triumphed and deception crumbled. It was a reminder that careful, deliberate action can restore balance, even when betrayal feels insurmountable. Life had changed, but it had also clarified who I was and who I would become. I was no longer a victim of lies or deceit. I was a man who had faced betrayal head-on, taken control, and emerged stronger, wiser, and more self. That strength, that clarity, would guide me forward. And I would never underestimate the power of patience, observation, and decisive action again. If this story gave you chills, hit that like button, share it with someone who appreciates the power of truth, and comment below with your own story of betrayal or justice. Subscribe to follow more gripping tales that show how patience, strategy, and courage can turn the tables when you least expect it.